I'd like to thank Sarita for introducing the anthem and the remix. Big up yourself, Sarita. Is this thing on? Can you hear properly on this thing? Thank you all for coming. We're starting a bit late. I'm supposed to have a 10-minute welcome, but I'm going to cut it short and just, I'd just like to share something with y'all before everything starts. I was asked to do this, to MC this function. I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist by profession. You're probably wondering why am I interested in fatherhood, because I'm a man thing. But in the course of my profession, in the course of my job, I developed an interest in women's issues. And I realized that a lot of our women are traumatized. And that led to an interest in child abuse and childhood trauma. And I realized a lot of our women are also lonely and in very dysfunctional relationships. So I started to look at our men. And I realized that absent fathers contribute to a lot of the dysfunction in our society more than we like to accept. It affects our girls and it affects our boys. So I just want to share something with you that I wrote recently, if you don't mind. And if you mind, I'm going to do it anyway. Tell me the truth, I know you bring the youth. So no bother say a jacket or a three-piece suit. Don't be a brute if you support your youth. No bother bail out and go pull parachute. Too many youths are grow with no father. Cause some of them man them woulda rather sow them seed like said them a farmer. Then said them a wicked performer. But when baby born them take off like a surfer. Like them a run from volcano lava. Then they run and hide like Osama. Ball jacket and create a heap of drama. But them man cool them come in like iguana. Causing the youths emotional trauma. Next thing them pick me hanging out on the corner. Smoking cigarette and marijuana. So tell me the truth and now you bring the youth. So nobody say a jacket or a three-piece suit. Don't be a brute if you support your youth. Nobody be a out and go pull parachute. Be proud of them, don't hide them. Protect them and guide them, affirm them, love them and be a good daddy. Big them up and make them feel like them a smarty. Supervise and help with the homework. Responsibility like that, you know for sure. Encourage them with the sports that them play. And make sure say you did it on sports day. Blow whistle, wave flag and hold up your hand. Make them know say you're them biggest fan. And when them a perform in a concert or play, clap and create holy parade. So tell me the truth and now you bring the youth. So nobody say a jacket or a three-piece suit. Don't be a brute if you support your youth. Nobody be out and go pull parachute. Look after them with all your ability, especially those with disability. Show them love and give them stability. Don't make them end up in a mental facility. Even if a buck ups and you never plan it, your responsibility. Know that them depend the planet. Yes, me general, you should have think about that before you bust your shot and make the belly get fat. Just remember every day that them have your DNA. So listen to what me I say with this your job, you don't fi play. So if you want sex but don't want what come next, draw for your Trojan or a Durex. Pull that up. We have a lot of welcome this evening. So we have a welcome by the JA Kids and participants in the JA Kids program. You're supposed to all know what the JA Kids thing is, but in case some of you don't know, the Department of Child and Adolescent Health at University of the West Indies, Mona, embarked on the JA Kids birth cohort study in 2011 with the primary purpose of collecting extensive data on the lives of over 9,700 Jamaican children and their families. The study seeks to improve the lives of Jamaican children by getting information on children's family, school, community, and environment to identify factors that help and hinder growth and development. So I have a welcome from some participants. Can you all come and introduce yourselves and offer your welcomes? You kids brave. When I was that age, I wasn't going on stage and saying anything.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Mina Desai. I was born on the 6th of September, 2011 at University Hospital, and I am a JA kid.
Very good.
Good evening. My name is Jacob Langren, and I was born on July 2nd, 2011 at Natal Hospital, and I am a JA kid.
Very good. Go ahead.
Welcome to the JA Kids Conference.
Very good. Ready?
Good evening. My name is Okelia Chambers. I was born on August the 18th, 2011 at University Hospital of the West Indies. Yui and I am a JA Kid. Welcome to the JA Kid Conference.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have greetings from somebody who is definitely not a kid. Dr. Trevor McCartney, Deputy Dean Faculty of Medical Sciences, University of the West Indies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. Senator Honorable Ruel Reid, Minister of Education, Youth and Information, the Most Honorable Mrs. Juliet Holness, Member of Parliament, Professor Alan Emond, Professor of Community Child Health, University of Bristol, Ms. Adriana Lavalle, Chief of Operations, IDB, Mrs. Trishna Williams Singh, Chair of the Early Childhood Commission, Dr. Judith Leiber from the Ministry of Health, Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, and Dr. Charlene Curtis, and welcome to each and every person here. You're all distinguished guests. I would like to thank Professor Sams-Vaughan and her team for the warm invitation to celebrate at this conference, which culminates the work that they have pioneered for over half a decade through researchers in the Faculty of Medical Sciences. Without a strong foundation in research, the university can neither survive nor flourish. And as such, it is always inspiring to see worthwhile and valuable research being conducted by members of the faculty, which has the potential of inspiring the life and livelihood of our nation. On behalf of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, and by extension, the University of the West Indies, let me applaud the team from the Department of Child and Adolescent Health for their stellar work and research related to the development of children, particularly in the most crucial years of their lives. Research is a very important driving force in the advancement of healthcare. And as such, we are in full support of the initiatives of the Jamaican birth cohort study. It is the continuous assessing of where we are and our vision of where we want to be that will propel us to investigate the how and the what. How we will get there and what we should do are the valid questions that push research as this one. Undoubtedly, this body of research will serve as a blueprint for not only Jamaica, but certainly the Caribbean region, in helping to understand the complexities of the factors which affect the health and growth of children in the first 5 years. As a precursor, it must be mentioned that the work began with a partnership between the UWI MONA and the Ministry of Health, the aim being to reduce perinatal morbidity and maternal mortality rates in the island. The results of the Jamaica Perinatal Morbidity and Mortality Survey impacted government policies, which led to a series of interventions of the program to benefit this challenge. Fast forward to today, and the Jamaican birth cohort study of 2011 has built on this program by incorporating new dimensions such as detailed developmental and behavioral evaluations in the early years of our children. We have embarked on a mission of social accountability within the Faculty of Medical Sciences. And this has far-reaching implications for this mandate. This research will stimulate a demand in society for private and public entities to improve the level of care offered to the children in our society. We must do more to engage our community and to assist in whatever way we can to alleviate some of the concerns highlighted in the study. This is a part of our civic duty. I congratulate Professor Samsvon and her team on this study and look forward to its impact on this and future generations of Jamaican children. Thank you so very much for being a part of this most worthwhile program, and this will go a far way in the development of our blessed nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. McCartney. And thanks for everything you taught me at the surgery clinic, which I've since forgotten. Next, we'll have greetings from the Inter-American Development Bank. Miss Adriana Lavallee here. Did I pronounce your name properly? Great, thank God. No, don't be afraid, I'm not going to do anything. I just talk a lot. Yes.
Well, since all protocols have been observed, let me just say, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank, and especially from Therese Turner-Jones, our general manager, who really wanted to be here this afternoon, but I know she couldn't make it, I'm very pleased to extend warm greetings on this exciting occasion of the JA Kids Conference and Exhibition. Let me start with a thought, because I'm not going to tell you when I was born, and certainly I cannot sing. So let me start with a thought. The path of development is a journey of discovery that is clear only in retrospect and is rarely a straight line. This is right, this is so true, and today we can think that the groundbreaking data that this study is bringing and unveiling today is really far advanced at that journey of discovery. And that is much clearer now on the factors that will impact the progressive development of Jamaica's children. If we think about it, we can count with less than the fingers of our hands the countries who have done this type of study. So really, the work that Jamaica has done is amazing, and again, congratulations on this work. The IDB is therefore very happy to be a partner on this important journey, and is particularly proud to congratulate Professor Samsvon today and her dedicated team here at the University of the West Indies for embarking this important research project, which is undoubtedly would undoubtedly improve the lives of the children here in Jamaica. As a knowledge-focused institution, the bank welcomes the ways in which JA Kids will deepen our understanding of the various factors that influence health, growth, and development in young children, and importantly, how it will enable the design and implementation of public policies, interventions, and programs that are evidence-based. This is how effective sustainable development happens, and that is why the IDB has been an avid supporter of JA Kids over the past 7 years, since it helps us to realize our own vision for Jamaica and the Caribbean, that is to improve lives by creating vibrant, sustainable economies where people are safe, productive, and happy. The first cohort study in 1985 made a significant impact in how Jamaican institutions care for children and how they were registered. Today, the IDB has no doubt that the groundbreaking data and analysis emerging from this second follow-up study will lead to innovation in how Jamaica children are treated from birth to adolescence. We also hope that the findings will serve to improve parenting in Jamaica and engender an understanding that boys and girls indeed develop differently. It is with these hopes and aspirations in mind that we were so happy to learn that JAK Kids took a new strategic step to connect with approximately 3,000 fathers to get their unique perspective on raising children. Of course, we know that the role of fathers is a crucial factor when designing effective parenting programs for both boys and girls. Finally, as we look ahead on how the new data can improve lives more broadly in the region, the IDB expects the policy recommendations coming out of JA Kids' findings to be translated and replicated across Latin America and the Caribbean, given the rigor and innovation associated with this research. It is with this context that IDB again congratulates Yui and her Professor Samsbong and her team and other stakeholders for successfully completing this pioneering study and hosting what promises to be an intriguing and empowering conference as we continue on this evolving journey of discovery and development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Now we'll have greetings from the Ministry of Health. From, I'm not laughing at her. She just, has anybody ever seen Dr. Leiber not smiling? Can someone send me a picture of her not smiling? I've just never seen her not smiling. Dr. Judith Leiber. Hold on, I just remembered something. I just got a note a while ago while I was standing over there. It said, Black Nissan pickup CK2314. A young gentleman gave me this. Does it mean that I won? I didn't win this? Black Nissan CK2314. You want the driver to do something about it? I wonder who that could be, though. Dr. Leiber.
Thank you, Dr. Abrams. All protocol observed. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to represent the Honorable Dr. Christopher Tufton at the launch of JA Kids Cohort Study Conference. I am pleased to hear in terms of the history of the collaboration from 1986 and 2003 between the university and the Ministry of Health in the perinatal morbidity and mortality survey. In fact, if you will indulge me for a minute, I remember Professor Thame, we finished pediatrics around the same time, and that she would have to rush out to do these postmortems on stillbirths. And I thought, wow, that is dedication. But we really have, that body of knowledge which has informed a lot of our policy and implementation in the Ministry of Health. And of course, she was aided by Professor Sam Zvaughan and Dr. Diana Ashley, and others, I'm sure. So we are particularly pleased again for this new JA Kids Cohort Study, which we know will assist us even further in improving the health care that we present for our children. In terms of the Ministry of Health, we have had a strong collaboration with the ECC. And I know at my desk, I've always been asked, what about the 0 to 3 in the health centers? What are you going to do about them in terms of parenting? And I'm pleased to say that through the Mental Health and Homelessness Task Force, we have started serious discussions about starting the early child stimulation program, the Reach Up, which was spearheaded by Professor Suzanne Walker, which talks about parenting training, both in the clinics and in the parents. So we're having serious talks about that, and I'm glad to announce that. Another program which we have instituted to improve the health of our mothers and infants is the PROMAC program. I'm sure all of you have heard about it, but its components include improvement in newborn and emergency obstetric care, the quality of our primary health care services and referral system. And in fact, a lot of our primary care was really built on maternal and child care. Our demographic is changing now, and Dr. Ashley was just saying to me that a lot of our clinics are like almost mini clinics. So we have to now change our clinics because we have to accommodate the non-communicable disease and the older population. But we still cannot forget our children because they are just number one, so we still have to keep our care there and keep us on the cutting edge. We have also begun the almost finished the certification of the Well Child Clinics. And that has been for a long time. That has been coming for a long time. I see Dr. Roe Porter in the audience. So I know it's been for a long time, but it's been coming. Okay. And of course, I can't forget my own child guidance clinics with child and adolescent mental health, where we seek to address the children who come with emotional and behavioral problems from 0 to 18 years. So once again, let me congratulate Prof. Sams Vaughan and the Department of Child and Adolescent Health and the university for this study. And the Ministry of Health is pleased to collaborate in any way that we can and to continue the work in terms of implementation and making sure that research is translated into good health care for all our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. And we have even more greetings. I feel like Christmas watching TVJ. And I suspect somebody with a twang to come up on the screen. Greetings from the Bronx. Mrs. Tricia Williamson, chairperson of the Early Childhood Commission.
Thank you. Senator, the Honorable Royal Reid, Minister of Education, Youth and Information, Professor McCartney, Deputy Dean, Clinical Faculty of Medical Science, Miss Adriano Lavalle, Dr. Leiber, yes, or Leiber, you're always smiling in meetings, and she's also a commissioner of the Early Childhood Commission, Professor Sams Vaughan. What do I say? Also, former chair of the Early Childhood Commission, big shoe that I have to fill. I'm trying, I'm getting there. Professor Emond, Professor of Community Child Health, University of Bristol. Dr. Roxanne Melbourne, Chambers, and Dr. Charlene Curtis, Miss Julianne Reese, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's my pleasure to bring greetings to you on behalf of Team Early Childhood Commission. Growing up in Jamaica, the first 5 years. Without a doubt, with so many early childhood stakeholders in this room, the next 2 days are poised to be productive and meaningful. I believe we're at the right place as people who are interested in the well-being of our children, seeing their development as the best way to improve our country. And nobody says it better than my boss, Senator the Honorable Royal Reid. Conferences of this educational and informative nature contribute to our understanding of the various factors that influence health, well-being, and development of young children. I know everyone who attends this conference will be leaving with new information as the research has provided national data on maternal health and well-being, pregnancy, paternal well-being and involvement, and much more. As we strive to provide information and make research-based resources available in order to improve the early childhood sector in Jamaica, the responsibility is ours to fervently align the shape of our environment to one that is encouraging and favorable for the growth and overall development of our children. To Professor Sams Vaughan and the J-Kids team, we are grateful that you saw the need for another cohort study following the first in 2011. This study places emphasis on behavioral and developmental needs of every Jamaican child. And this, I have been told, was lacking in the first study. On behalf of Team ECC, I take this opportunity to thank you for organizing this conference, as we place greater focus on issues relating to our children. I ask participants to focus on the information being shared. Please, ladies and gentlemen, the information, I'm sure, will emphasize, as we all know, and we're walking 12 operating standards that are geared towards ensuring that children are provided with the best environment for their stimulation, growth, and development, but more importantly, their individual success. If we get it right from start, we will experience the domino effect of primary, secondary, and higher learning. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you very much, Tricia. Even though you said that Dr. Sam's Vaughan foot big, but that's okay. I'm just saying, it was implied. I'm just saying. I spoke about JA Kids before, but I'd like to call Charlene Curtis, who is a study director, to tell us more about JA Kids. I have a funny feeling she knows more about it than me.
Senator the Honorable Royal Reid, Minister of Education, Youth and Information, representatives of the Inter-American Development Bank and the University of the West Indies, my fellow speakers this evening, distinguished guests, all the JA kids out there, good evening. Tonight is an incredibly proud and emotional moment for the JA Kids research team. We have all worked tirelessly to achieve our goal of providing culturally relevant national data on children and families in 21st century Jamaica. But it is also a very special and proud moment for me personally. Not only does it signal the culmination of 8 years of hard work and dedication to this project as its study director, but by a twist of fate, I myself am the proud mother of a JA kid who helped to welcome you this evening. Getting here tonight to this moment is not something I could easily describe to you. Mounting a longitudinal study of this nature in a low to middle income country such as Jamaica is nothing short of a miraculous feat. There are many people in this audience tonight who can attest to the literal blood, sweat, and tears, a whole lot of tears, involved in enrolling and maintaining contact with 9,700 children and their families. Tomorrow at our conference, Professor Sans Vaughan, our fearless leader and principal investigator, will walk you through the intricacies of our study's method. Right, Prof? Tonight, however, I decided that instead of trying to condense what she will discuss in detail during the conference, I would like to take you on a trip down memory lane to give you a glimpse of the extraordinary journey that has been the JA Kids study. All the members of the senior research team, Jody, Sidney, and myself, worked with Professor Sans Vaughan in various capacities prior to the start of the JA Kids study. We would always hear her reminisce about her work on Jamaica's first birth cohort study, which started in 1986. She would say that she wanted to launch a new birth cohort study, and the time was right. We smiled, and we nodded, but deep down, I think I can speak for my colleagues by saying that we thought she was absolutely crazy. We did not think that we could ever raise enough capital to undertake a study of this nature. However, one thing we soon learned was that we should never, ever underestimate our boss. A chance meeting at a conference in Antigua at the end of 2009 led to our first cycle of funding from the Inter-American Development Bank. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves in the very real position of having to set up a national research study. This led to the infamous work sessions on Prof's veranda. We spent countless hours, I think Krishna can attest to that, planning and plotting, designing and redesigning, budgeting and rebudgeting, shooting for the stars and then being shot back down again, especially by Professor McCobbins and Dr. Deanna Ashley, who gave their advice from their work on the 1986 study. Some nights our excitement level would be so high that we would convince ourselves that this would be the most amazing cohort study the world has ever seen. Our ambition knew no bounds, and this led to many innovative, but also many ill-fated aspects of our study. For example, we decided to enroll mothers in pregnancy to capture information on this important period of development. This meant somehow accessing all 300 antenatal clinics across the island. It also meant trying to find ways to reach pregnant women who receive their antenatal care, like with Dr. Abrahams, in the private system. It required tremendous manpower and training, and it was probably one of the most difficult times in our study. Partly because we were trying to reach so many mothers in so many different places, and partly because we were so green, so new to it all. But somehow we were able to enroll over 5,000 women in our sample who had an estimated data delivery between July 1st and September 30th, 2011. I'm proud to report that we have one of the only antenatal samples in a cohort study in a country anywhere, right? At this time, we also attempted to collect cord blood samples from pregnant mothers and also blood samples, antenatal blood samples. Now, if you thought we knew nothing about enrolling and interviewing pregnant women island-wide, I can assure you we knew even less about collecting biological samples from our cohort mothers. Luckily, we had tremendous guidance from our colleagues in what became known as a consortium, made up of Michigan State University, the University of Texas Health and Science Center at Houston, and Wayne State University. At one point, we even had bi-weekly conference calls just to ensure that all aspects of this sub-study were running smoothly. Then in July to September 2011, our JA Kids babies were born. And while the 26 private and public facilities where women gave birth that we knew of were easier to man than the over 300 scattered antenatal clinics, it was still a tremendous feat to enroll and collect data from the 9,700 mothers and 3,400 fathers at the birth of their child. We had interviewers working on 7-hour shifts to recruit and interview families. We were able to enroll over 86% of all children born in Jamaica during those 3 months, and we were even able to collect cord blood from 144 newborns at the University Hospital of the West Indies. Thank you. Remember that I mentioned that we were a little over-ambitious. So you're going to see this is a theme running through. At the same time, we also embarked on a sub-study designed to examine the causes for over 1,500 admissions to neonatal intensive care units and special care nurseries across the island. This involved detailed review of medical records, completion of our neonatal questionnaire, and coding using the latest international classification of disease. Jody, our research and data manager, is still tearing out her hair to this day, trying to figure out some of the medical jargon used on that questionnaire. By early 2012, we were already deep into planning for our next contact with the JA Kids families via telephone. Given the high level of cell phone penetration in our country, we thought, okay, this will be easy. We'll just call mom or dad on the phone, ask them a few questions about how their baby's doing. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you that we could not have been more wrong. Do you have any idea how quickly people change their cell phone numbers in Jamaica? The 9 to 12 month telephone follow-up certainly tested our resourcefulness. Luckily, we had asked mothers at the birth of their child to list the names and contact numbers of at least 4 people who would always be able to get in touch with them. In many cases, we had to exhaust these additional contacts to reach our mothers. We also had to implement rigorous calling regimes, including nights and weekends, to accommodate mothers who couldn't just sit down for a 30-minute interview in the middle of their workday, right? Our hard work paid off, though, and we were able to make contact and interview 7,700 participants, representing 80% of the cohort. Thank you. We even had a special investigation at this time to examine supports for parents whose children had been admitted to neonatal intensive care units shortly after their birth. After this, we conducted detailed follow-ups with 17 cohort children affectionately known in our study as the firstborns. JA Kids staff members visited families at their homes across Jamaica to provide a richer perspective on the lives and experiences of Jamaican children and their families. I'm proud to say that Jacob is one of our firstborn babies. So thanks for being here, Jacob. That's very special for us. A short documentary, which you can view in our exhibition, was produced from these visits. This was an amazing experience for our research staff, some of whom I'm happy to say are here tonight. They witnessed many heartfelt and also many heartbreaking moments while visiting these families. Soon, the research team turned their attention to GIS mapping of study families in collaboration with the Mona Geoinformatics Institute and to the planning of a contact with a subset of the JA kids when they were 18 to 22 months. Following intense training in developmental and behavioral assessments, research assistants evaluated just over 1,000 randomly selected families. At this time, we also completed follow-up interviews with over 2,500 families via telephone. So as you can see, we've been very busy. Along with our regular checks on families' health, well-being, nutrition, and environment, we also asked questions to screen for the emergence of developmental disabilities in general and autism spectrum disorders in particular. If there were any red flags raised, children and their parents were invited in for further testing and referral. After the 18 to 22 month contact, the first phase of JA Kids came to an end. And based on the general success of the cohort study, the IDB once again invested heavily in our research. But we encountered another extremely challenging phase in our study's history. This includes chikungunya, drought, all kinds of things. And after quite a few bumps in the road, we were able to assess the development, school readiness, executive function, and behavior of 1,300 JA kids when they were 4 to 5 years. These assessments took place in several locations across Jamaica, including Kingston, Spanish Town, Mandeville, Falmouth, St. Anne's Bay, Morant Bay, Black River, Maypen, Montego Bay, and Savlamar. Our team was dispatched for days at a time, working from sunup to sundown to complete these lengthy assessments in the designated time. Now, I've told you about all the data we've collected. Can you imagine the level of data entry, cleaning, management that it takes to cope with information from all our cohort families at 4 contact points in time? It's tremendous. But somehow, we were able to use our creativity to cope with all this data and to keep track of our families over time. To be honest, we could have a whole conference on what not to do in a birth cohort study. And we certainly learned most things the very, very hard way. But we survived, and we are immensely proud to be launching this conference tonight. We finally have an opportunity to share our findings with all of you. And our successes in this study are a testament to the dedication and perseverance of all the individuals who worked with JA Kids over the years, the sincerity and enthusiasm of our cohort families, and the support that we receive from our funders and the University of the West Indies. Sometimes I like to think that as a cohort study, JA Kids is very special. But when I hear Dr. Ashley and Professor McCobbins and Professor Sams Vaughan talk about what they went through in the 1986 study, and when I hear other researchers who have worked on cohort studies speak about their experiences, I realize that in our way, our journey is unique, but not necessarily special. All cohort studies involve some degree of trial and error, successes and failures, epic battles with nature, and troubles of a more man-made persuasion. But ultimately, from a research perspective, I think there's just something magical about following the same group of individuals over time. And despite the many ups and downs, I don't think that we would trade a minute of this experience for anything in the world. And if you want to learn more about the study and our journey, as well as the impact of the 1986 cohort study, I invite you to visit our exhibition next door tonight or at any time during the next 2 days of the conference. As a developmental psychologist, working on JA Kids has been a dream come true for me. While I am sad to see this chapter closing, I know that in a way, it's really just the beginning of something bigger. It's an opportunity for the study to showcase its potential to be a remarkable resource for everyone from parents to policymakers. We now want to see JA Kids influence policy and programs in our country and truly impact the lives of our children and their families here in Jamaica and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Curtis. At this point, I'd like to welcome the Most Honorable Mrs. Juliet Holness, who is a patron for the JA Kids Conference, to offer her remarks. Mrs. Holness.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Let me declare from the outset that I am very honored and pleased to have been invited to be patron of this game-changing and groundbreaking conference focusing on none other than our children. My unwavering dedication to the children of Jamaica is testament to the firm belief held by my husband and myself that our children, Adam and Matthew, must become adults in a Jamaica that is not prosperous for some, and not only prosperous for those who are privileged, but prosperous for every single Jamaican child, regardless of race, color, class, or creed. We are dedicated to building a prosperous Jamaica from the foundations. And for us, the foundations are our children. They represent the hopes and the dreams of our nation, Jamaica. It is investing in them, as well as investigating their needs, their strengths, their vulnerabilities, that we will enable and we will be better prepared to appropriately cater to their social needs, physical needs, and their economic infrastructure, which will undoubtedly ensure that Jamaica will be established as that place, the place where we can comfortably live, work, raise our families, do business, and retire in prosperous peace. The challenge of fatherhood remains an issue for us in Jamaica. I must say I am somewhat lucky and very blessed to have had my father in my life for my entire childhood. And my dad is still here with me today, providing the guidance, whether I ask for it, yes or no. I'm happy to have Daddy. Not everyone has had my life experience. And I am convinced when I look back that my own experience with my father may have played a significant role in my being, I will say, somewhat lucky enough. I'm a child of God, so it's not about luck. But I believe fortunate enough and wise enough to marry a man who remains not only in my life, but in the lives of our two boys, Adam and Matthew. I am proud of a father who understands that he should lead by example and that men should be assured that their responsibility is assuming their rightful place in the lives of their children, thus leading to a more balanced adulthood for these children. I must say my mother didn't do it alone. I am not doing it alone, and neither should any mother do it alone. An environment of sharing and equality is crucial to a well-prepared and conditioned adult. Goal 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals speaks to gender equality, and I love to look at it. But I'd like to clarify this evening that the concept of those who may have an unbalanced perception of what gender equality is all about. It is not about men being suppressed so that women can rise. It is not about women replacing men as the breadwinners and as the head of the households. It is not about insisting that we are equal. It is about men and women taking an active role together and sharing the equal opportunities for working together in sustainable partnerships towards their individual futures as well as the collective future of our children, the future of our country, and the future of all mankind. I am pleased as patron and as parent to participate in this partnership for prosperity. May this conference achieve all its aims in service of our children, the children of Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Holness. And I'd like to invite Senator the Honorable Royal Reid, Minister of Education, Youth and Information. We're not officially, we're not quite finished yet, but he's going to officially open the conference and the exhibition. It's an exhibition as well, y'all know that, right? Were you aware of that? Okay. Minister Reid.
Well, I was just saying, I was saying I'm speaking after Ja. Yes, that's Juliet Holness. I want to reflect the protocol that has been established and recognize officially the Most Honorable Juliet Holness, patron of the Jamaica Kids Conference, to all the other distinguished guests that were already named, special invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. May I thank the leadership of the Jamaica Kids team and by extension, the Department of Child and Adolescent Health Care at the University of the West Indies for the invitation to be here this evening. It is my privilege as Minister of Education, Youth and Information to be anchoring the leg of this relay and officially launch this conference. We indeed have a mammoth task ahead of us based on the findings of the study carried out by the Jamaica Kids and the Ministry of Health. I take this opportunity to applaud the team for the important work that they have been doing. Put your hands together for them. Professor Sams Vaughan, our beloved, because you know you're guiding light along with, I saw Rebecca Tortella, I'm sure I saw her earlier, where early childhood is concerned. You along with our team at the Early Child Commission understand the importance of such a study. We're focused on our objectives and we are moving to get things done. And we got this Energizer Bunny, Trisha Williams Singh, to light some fire in the early childhood sector. And I know she has been very excited and exciting her team and indeed the entire sector. The implications of this study, we certainly, Madam Chairman, expect that if you want to be reappointed next year, you better get the job done. I have a little time to get it done. The ministry realizes that in establishing our policies and programs, we'll be focusing on early intervention, child development, and academic achievement, and our efforts must be underpinned by in-depth research. Evidence is crucial in supporting these initiatives. Armed with information, we are better able to allocate both financial and human resources for each sector that supports the development of our special children. As we continue to follow our mandate, guided by a long-term national development plan to enable Jamaica to achieve developed country status by 2030, we are cognizant of various pre-existing social problems and are determined to do all that we can to fix them. We need all stakeholders hands on deck, both private and public sector. At the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, we have been placing particular focus on early child care and education. We are guided by studies led by the University of West Indies and Professor Sam Vaughan on the imperative, the importance of our first 1,000 days in the lives of our children, calculated from the first day of pregnancy up to age 2+, is a period of rapid growth and development, as during these early stages, organs and tissues are being formed and trained. It is at this time that parents are provided with an excellent opportunity for shaping the long-term health of our children by implementing nutritional and nurturing practices. The government strategy through the Ministry of Education is to cater for the population of babies from birth to age 18 years. And we're not taking over the role of the Ministry of Health, but we are providing strategic support. We have to cover all our children, particularly those who are coming out of vulnerable circumstances, which themselves have been victims of circumstance. In fact, our overall education system is reflective of this unequal outcome by virtue of the fact that they are all not starting at the same level. So we have to collaborate with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. We had a nice meeting with them this afternoon, as we're going to try and carve some more resources out of the budget next year, supported by Most Honorable Juliet Holness in that regard. We want to keep them in school and further support our children from 0 to 18 and youth up to the age of 29, in keeping with UNESCO's definition of youth. The ministry believes that it has a crucial role to play, especially in the early stimulation and pre-education years, from 3 months to 3+ years, and even further in the early childhood levels from 3 years and 8 months to 5 years of age. So we welcome this study. In fact, we have been adopting quite a few of the models now emerging across the world, Canada, and even in Jamaica. I was very heartened to visit Small Treasures, where they now have institutions taking babies from 3 months right up to age 6. And what we want is to ensure that the poor and vulnerable communities, they also have access to these kind of institutions. That is why this year we're launching 2 publicly funded daycare centers, 2 for each constituency. We're starting, and we hope to build that out going forward. We're also aware that the future of our children is highly dependent on the role, as was said by Mrs. Holness, of all parents, with special focus on the role of our fathers. I join with the British poet George Herbert in his well-known quote in supporting the role of the father: "One father is more than 100 schoolmasters." Our fathers must realize a vision for transforming the lives of their children. At the heart of this vision for Jamaica is a transformation of the society by both men and women and our children. This transformation will only take place if there is a change in the mindset of the nation, which addresses those traits that are likely to inhibit progress towards development. We see the correlation between parenting practices, family structures, and psychosocial variables in our children, keenly focusing on issues of exclusion, personal power, and self-esteem. The Guidance and Counseling Unit and the National Parenting Support Commission are equally important in executing solutions to various issues that would have been identified, and as such, all support must be given as they carry out their mandates. And you're likely to see some more consolidation between the National Parenting Support Commission, the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, and in collaboration with, of course, Early Child Commission. On behalf of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and by extension, the people of Jamaica, let me conclude again by commending you for your work. Continue to be service-minded, collaborative, and enthusiastic as we focus on the future of Jamaica, our children. I would therefore like to officially launch the staging of the Jamaica Kids Conference 2018. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to be like you guys when I grow up. Let's have somebody hand me the speech and take it off. I love that. And I want to be like that. We now have a musical item from the UWI Pan-Rhythm Steel Orchestra. Please tell me the orchestra has more people than just you guys, right? It's bigger than you, right? You have some guys in the background, right? Okay. Give them a round of applause. Give him another round of applause. I guess that's it. They're taking away the stuff, so I guess that's basically it. So we have some keynote speeches on fatherhood, which I know most of you are eagerly awaiting. That's one of the reasons I'm here this afternoon, because I want to hear this stuff. I'm a father myself, and I know it's scary that I have people in my DNA running around the place. I have 3 kids. My eldest is 18, my daughter is 18, and my sons are 12 and 6. And fatherhood has been a remarkable journey for me. But there's something I have to tell you before we even get into this that is very important for fathers to speak to their kids, to their children. It's important for parents too, but I realize many people are reluctant to speak to their children about sex and sexuality. And these children are growing up in a totally different era from what you and I grew up in. I want you to just understand that. And I'll give you an example of that. So when my daughter was growing up, I had read that girls who grow up with absent fathers tend to have a higher risk of ending up in dysfunctional relationships, abusive relationships, and they also tend to have a higher risk of being promiscuous and ending up having a teen pregnancy. And I couldn't deal with that stress. So I make sure I bonded my daughter from day one. 7th of July 1999, up on Labor Ward up here. And one of the things, that is important to me when I was raising my daughter was to pick her up from school. And I remember sometimes, up to this week, a patient asked me why I don't get a driver for my kids, and I'm saying, I'm not doing that. It's one of the parents or a family member, but it's very important. And some of the conversations, I don't know how many of you pick up your kids and talk to them on the way home from school. You hear a lot of weird stuff. And one of the things I learned is that some of the conversations I was having with my daughter at 10, 12, I thought I wouldn't have to have until she was 18. So let me tell you something. Even if you keep your kids away from social media and cell phones, all they need is one child at school with a phone. That's a whole other education. So I'll give you an example. I pick up my daughter. She was in 2nd form at Immaculate. Big up Immaculate, good school. So I pick up my daughter. I'm going home. My daughter's in the back seat. And we're talking. And my daughter's in the back. And out of nowhere, my daughter says to me, Daddy, what is a rainbow kiss? I'm a gynecologist. I have no idea what a rainbow kiss is. I don't know. So I said, Leah, I have no idea what that is. What is that? And she says to me, it's when a man goes down on a woman when she's in her period. The woman goes down on the man, they kiss, and semen and blood mix up. My daughter was in 2nd form educating me. It sounds graphic, but you need to understand what kids are exposed to. So I try to be very calm. I'm in the car because I don't want to crash. I was totally freaked out. And you don't want kids to see you freaking out or they'll stop talking to you. And in those days, we had Blackberries. And I was saying to her, so Leah, what do you think about that? She said, I think it's nasty. I said, that's true. She said, you can get STIs like that. I said, yes, and we had a discussion, like HIV, hepatitis B, etc. And I'm Googling it up on the phone, and I found it in the Urban Dictionary, and that's what it is. And I asked her, Leah, where did you learn this from? And it was some girls talking after school under the tree. And we had many more conversations like this. One day going home, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my daughter asked me, Daddy, what's a ménage à trois? And that was it, just out of nowhere, just bam, bam, bam. And I just had to answer the questions honestly. And as she got older, she could come to me and ask me anything. I remember when she had her first kiss, she was in high school, like 6th form, she kissed some boy and came and told me. I didn't freak out. Let's be honest. In high school, you kiss somebody, don't it? No, you have to be honest and realistic. So I said, what was that like? Was that okay? Good for you. Being honest. And then she went on a date the other day, wanted me to drop her somewhere. So I said, who is this boy, where I'm coming from, etc. So I took her and I left her. She called me half an hour later to come back for her because it was near Ligony. He was supposed to meet her at 8. He calls her 8:15 from Portmore saying that he can't come. So we had a discussion about men and women. I said, hey, Leah, some waste man thing that, Yo, anyhow you bring home that boy, they may get some big licking, Leah. It's very important to be close to your kids. So men, make sure you're close to your daughters. So right now, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Professor Alan Emond. He's a clinical academic pediatrician and head of the Center for Child and Adolescent Health in Bristol, that's in the UK. He holds the positions of Professor of Community Child Health at the University of Bristol and Honorary Consultant Pediatrician at the University Hospitals Bristol Trust. He has extensive research experience in epidemiology and health service evaluation, was involved in the founding of the Emond longitudinal study of parents and children, and has published on a wide range of pediatric topics using this cohort. Alan is active in clinical trials involving children, both as principal investigator and chair of trial steering groups. Past national leadership roles include chair of the British Pediatric Surveillance Unit and chair of the British Association of Community Child Health. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Alan Emond.
So good evening, and thank you very much for those kind words and for the invitation to speak. It's a great pleasure for me to be back here at UWI because I first came as a student in 1977, and then I lived and worked here in the 80s and have been coming back ever since. And it's lovely to see so much progress, new buildings such as this lovely, wonderful space here. But it's also very nice to see the charm of UWI is just the same, and it's a lovely place, so I'm very pleased to be back and to share with you some of the research evidence on fathers, which is going to be such an important part of JA Kids. So I'd like to start with a statement of conflict of interest and a confession. So conflict of interest is I am a father and I'm a grandfather. And when I was reviewing the evidence for the literature for this talk, obviously I interpreted it in my own experience. But it's impressive how the experience of fatherhood is very similar all over the world and how we can learn from each other. My confession is that when I started as a father, I didn't know what I was doing. Like so many young fathers, I was just relying on my own experience from my own father. My own mum was very helpful in giving me little tips, but I had no training course, I had no manual, and I sort of did from instinct. And I got through, I made mistakes, but I think that was the experience of so many men, and it's only now that as a grandfather, I can really say that I know what I'm doing. And again, I think that's a very important lesson in the life course for men. So with those two initial statements, I'd like to move on and tell you a little bit about the structure of my talk. I've concentrated very much on the experience in high-income countries. I've looked at fatherhood across the life course, starting in pregnancy, looked at the problems of paternal mental health early on, and then looked at the impact of fathers on child development, child mental health, and child outcomes right the way across life. And then to end with, I'm going to highlight some of the conceptual and methodological issues in this whole area. Now, the sources I've used have been longitudinal studies. JA Kids is a longitudinal study, and so I think it's important when I'm setting the scene for what you're going to hear subsequently from Maureen, that I talk about data from longitudinal studies. So those are studies with data on fathers and their behavior and their interest in their children and child outcomes. Now, inevitably, the majority of these are from high-income settings because that's where the funding is. So the UK in particular has had a series of longitudinal studies, the 1958 and 1970 national cohort studies, the Avon longitudinal study of parents and children, ALSPAC, which is the one that I've been involved with. We set up in 1990 to 1991, and so our cohort are now 26 years old. And then the Millennium Cohort Study, which enrolled in the year 2000. So these cohorts have been followed through, and there's been data on fathers in all of them. There's also lots of data from the US, from national cohort studies and some particular targeted longitudinal studies such as the fragile families, and also useful longitudinal data from Australia and Canada. I have looked for research, longitudinal research from lower middle income country settings, and there isn't very much, and this is why JA Kids is going to be such a trailblazer. Most of the research has been cross-sectional and mostly qualitative in nature. So there's some interesting work coming out of India now on the whole changing role of fathers with the modernization of the Indian economy. And from Jamaica, there's the Jamaica Father Study, which was a very interesting study of the qualitative experience of being a father in 5 different locations in 2005. But I shamelessly am telling you today about the quantitative studies and the longitudinal studies on fathers and their children. So the first thing to say is that the age of fathers is increasing. Now, you'd hope this would eventually result in more mature parenting. We wait to see. But in England now, the average age of fathers is 33, and you'll notice this skewed distribution here with 68% over the age of 30. So here you've got the fathers in turquoise and the mothers in the orange color. And you can see that there's a tail on the right there, so fathers go right on up to 45 years and older. And on the left, you can see that the tail of the teen mums and dads is getting smaller. And there's been a big campaign in the UK to try to reduce teen pregnancies. In Jamaica, the average age is also rising. In JA Kids, the average age of the fathers was 30. But unlike the European setting, most of these fathers are in common law and visiting unions, with only 15% of JA Kids dads being married. And of course, this results in a more unstable relationship for the parents, and the UNICEF study in Jamaica in 2000 showed that 50% of these cohabiting arrangements had broken down by the time the child was 5. And nearly half of Jamaican households are headed by a woman. But that's just to put it in context. Maureen's going to tell you a lot more about the experience of Jamaican fathers in the 21st century. So UK fathers, this is very recent work from ONS. Similarly, the number of married fathers is decreasing from 75% in the 1980s, now down to about 50% of couples being married. But they are cohabiting, 85% living with the parent, and most of them are very pleased. They may be shocked, but they're eventually pleased about the pregnancy. And they show engagement in pregnancy with attendance at antenatal clinics, ultrasound scan, and at birth. Now, what's the importance of the father's role in pregnancy? Well, there's a lot of literature on this. So father's engagement in pregnancy correlates with the parity. So he's more likely to be engaged with the firstborn. It certainly correlates with father's age. The older father's more likely to be engaged, and the more educated father's more likely to be engaged. And similarly, with socioeconomic status, the more advantaged fathers are more likely to be engaged in pregnancy. But there are complex ethnic and cultural issues going on here. And in Britain now, Afro-Caribbean and many African fathers are showing similar behavior to white fathers. The cultural groups that are showing very different behavior in pregnancy are the Bangladeshi and Pakistani fathers, who culturally, it's not part of their deal to get involved with their pregnant partner. They see that as a woman's world, and their job comes later. But there's no doubt that father's engagement does correspond to mother's outcomes in pregnancy. So there's evidence from this big review in 2013 that father's engagement in pregnancy correlates with mother's general happiness and well-being, her mental health and physical health postpartum, and also, and importantly, engagement of the family with health professionals in terms of adoption of preventative practices, immunizations, and so on. So early engagement by fathers is a very important marker of subsequent health for the mother. However, many fathers feel disengaged from the antenatal process. This study showed that a large proportion of fathers felt excluded from the woman's world. And antenatal care is increasingly focusing on achieving a safe delivery of a healthy baby. And preparation for parenthood seems to be falling off in many high-income countries. The other obvious thing to say is that marital satisfaction may remain stable during pregnancy, but it often declines significantly in the perinatal period. And the transition for parenthood for many parents is difficult, and their relationship has to adjust. And these are often where people are flying by the seat of I certainly was. You fly by the seat of your pants and you realize that these transitions are happening to you. You're not quite sure what's going on. And this is often a time of marital disharmony and discord. So what's the solution? How do we engage fathers in preparing for parenthood? Now, there is evidence on this. Firstly, the evidence suggests that targeted groups for fathers are much better than universal groups. Universal groups, such as this one here, are very good for helping fathers become engaged with the birthing process and being a support to the mother through labor. But in terms of preparing for parenthood, it needs to be led by men and directed at men. And this research suggests that at least 5 sessions using 2 trainers are needed to get the full benefit. And that's clearly very resource intensive. But maybe that's going to be a good investment for engagement in the long term. So preparation for parenthood, I think, is a very important investment that we need to encourage. Now, one way to prepare for parenthood is to give paternity leave, and many high-income settings are now legislating for paternity leave, but it's often unpaid. In the Millennium Cohort study, they asked very specifically the fathers about whether they took their paid employment, paternity leave, and not surprisingly, over 90% took it if it was available, but it was usually only 3 to 5 days. Now, there are other high-income settings where there's longer periods and more flexible. So in Scandinavia, they have much more flexible arrangements. But even with a short period of 3 to 5 days, there are measurable benefits in terms of early engagement with practical childcare, and it goes right through until the age of 8 months in terms of getting up at night with the children. So there's no doubt that early paternity support does help the early engagement of the father. However, pregnancy and the transition is a stressful time for fathers as well as for mothers. And research has shown that 8% of fathers have a diagnosed clinical depression, and many more suffer from feelings of anxiety and stress, which result in irritability and stress in the relationship. So fathers' depressive symptoms in pregnancy do have a correlation with early infancy, and there's research showing depressive fathers have infants that cry more and that show more emotional symptoms early on. So antenatal paternal depression is important to identify, and all it requires is a couple of sensitive questions to involve the man in the process. So it's not all about the woman and her preparing for delivery. Now, postnatal paternal depression is even more important, but it's difficult to be sure of the prevalence of paternal depression because often the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale is used, and this is a scale that's been designed for maternal postnatal depression. And there was a very interesting study done in Sweden where they compared fathers using the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale and using the HAD, another established depression scale, and they found that the EPDS was picking up more anxiety in the fathers rather than depression. So with that caveat, I think you've got to be careful because it's a scale that was derived for women. It's being used on men. However, in ALSPAC, the children of the 90s, we have looked in great detail about the effect of postnatal depression in fathers. And those that are above the cutoff for depressive diagnosis, there are long-term outcomes for the children, including a twofold increase in the adjusted odds ratios of emotional and behavioral issues on the Strength and Difficulties questionnaire at 3.5, and a continuing risk over 2.5 times of conduct problems in boys in the school age period. So early paternal depression is another very important marker of mental health issues. Now, how does that work? How does paternal psychopathology on the left result in child psychopathology on the right? Well, there were 4 proposed causal pathways. At the bottom, genetic liability, and certainly depression and anxiety and ADHD and many other developmental issues have a strong genetic component. Then there's the effect on the mother's psychological well-being. Clearly, a depressed father will have an impact on the mother's well-being as well. And there's an increased risk of marital conflict. And remember that most interpersonal violence in pregnancy is verbal, and it's due to abusive relationships. And that's often due to paternal anxiety and stress about all sorts of things. So there's no doubt that that's another pathway. And then finally, there's the actual direct effect of a depression on a father on his own parenting and his own responsiveness. So you can see there's multiple ways in which problems in the mental health of the father can transmit through both directly and indirectly to issues with the child. On the physical front, I think there is one thing the fathers can help with early on, and that's to promote breastfeeding. And there's lots of evidence from all over the world that one of the most important factors in whether a mother initiates breastfeeding and whether she sustains it is whether her partner is supportive. And there's quite interesting research showing the value of specific training for fathers on breastfeeding. So the Father's Infant Feeding Initiative was a UK study which offered training for fathers both antenatally and postnatally on breastfeeding and its value and how to support it. And they showed clear advantages in both initiation of breastfeeding and sustaining breastfeeding at 6 weeks. And the second study I've highlighted there comes from Australia, where they actually taught fathers how to manage the problems of breastfeeding. So the simple things like attachment issues, painful nipples, and so on. And training the fathers in the basics of these common problems, which is often a reason why women give up early, resulted, surprise, surprise, in longer lactation and more women continuing with full breastfeeding until the required 6 months. So focusing on fathers to support breastfeeding is certainly cost beneficial. Now, fathers and child development, this is, there's a lot of evidence here, some of it from very good trials and longitudinal studies, and there's a very nice review here in 2007, which has shown that even just cohabitation has a benefit. Having a father living in the same house will reduce the externalizing behavior in male children, but engagement of the father with the child has universal benefits on IQ, both for girls and for boys. And there's lots of longitudinal evidence showing a sustained benefit in IQ and other cognitive skills from having engagement from the father early on. And this, of course, translates into improved educational attainment. And many of the long-term benefits of having an engaged father, I think, are mediated through this means. There's also evidence that engagement reduces antisocial behavior and criminality in adolescence as well. Now, what about fathers and mental health? So the positive advantage of having an engaged father is that you will reduce depression in childhood. So paternal warmth and emotional responsiveness in the Alspach study, which were directly measured early on in the style of parenting from the fathers, did reduce the prevalence of depression in the preschool period, in the prepubertal period. And the longitudinal studies, the cohort studies from 58 and 70, have both shown that positive direct involvement of fathers and the quality of father relationships with the mother both improve the measures of children's mental health. And this runs through particularly into adolescence. I think one of the interesting things about father's research is how early engagement, preschool, can have impacts in adolescence. So father engagement early on, and that's usually a marker of engagement through into adolescence, does protect against depression, particularly in girls, and emotional problems at 16 and at 18, both in boys and girls. Now, in the long run, we're relying on studies which were conducted in an era when fathering was very different, but there is evidence from the long-term cohort studies in Europe that father involvement before the age of 7 does have a long-term impact. So, not surprisingly, it predicts educational attainment at 20. It predicts locus of control and higher self-esteem. This is particularly seen in girls in the mid-20s. Less psychological distress. This is from the 1970 cohort study. Better relationships with partners. And employment, finally, employment status at 42. So there's clear evidence longitudinally about the value of early engagement and support of fathers. So how is that a father's involvement can have an impact over such a long time? Well, this is quite a good theoretical framework here from Pleck. And you see on the right side, there's what is called the auxiliary domains, which are the traditional provider role of father, providing material benefits, making sure that children have the goods and services that they need, and ensuring that the children are cared for. That is, if you like, the traditional father role. But what seems to have the impact is over on this side. So positive engagement, interaction, playing games, reading books, playing sports. This is the line that seems to have the impact on cognition. Warmth and responsiveness, the closeness and responsiveness of the father to the child, showing affection, showing appreciation, seems to relate very strongly with the mental health, and particularly in girls. And then the control aspect, the monitoring, decision-making, limit setting, boundary setting, discipline, knowing where the child is. That seems to be the mechanism which results in improved behavior, less antisocial behavior, less criminality. So I think those are quite interesting frameworks to think about in terms of the medium in which fathering has an impact. So why do some dads get more involved than others? Well, clearly, the certainty of paternity and the relationship with the mother are core. If you're uncertain about either of those, you're going to stand back. Also, I think the very important role model is the experience of your own father. And that is certainly the fallback position that most first-time fathers go to. The gender of the child is an issue, and fathers find it easier often to engage early on with boys. But as I've shown, the impact on the girls is just as strong. There's the educational background of the fathers. Obviously, that does impact on the quality of the engagement, and the cultural expectations of what a father does. And many fathers feel that their role comes later, and I think where fathers need to be encouraged and trained for parent is the importance of the early attachment, the early engagement. So if you turn the coin over, what are the effects of absent fathers? And sadly, there's a lot of research evidence here. But absent is a variable term, and I think when you're reading the literature on absence, you need to think, well, define your terms. What are you talking about? Because clearly there's a big difference between a dad that's dead, a dad that's divorced and living away, or a dad that's just no longer cohabiting, a dad that's not visiting, and a dad that's not engaged. So absence is a spectrum, and I think some of the literature confounds this. But there is heaps of evidence about some of the causal effects of absent fathers. And absent fathers do impact on educational attainment, and then that impacts subsequently on the labour force, on mental health, particularly in adolescence, and then the externalising behaviour which you see in boys through childhood and through into delinquency and criminality, and then alcohol and substance abuse in adolescence and early adult life. And then, as we've already heard, girls' early sexual initiation and their happiness in relationships and the ability to choose an appropriate partner. Because what you're doing as a dad is you're showing your son how to treat women, and you're showing your daughter what to expect from a man. And if you're not there, they've got no role model. So what are the confounding issues in research on fathers? Well, firstly, whose report? Now, in the Ausbach study, we did not enroll fathers separately at pregnancy, and this was a big mistake, and I'm so pleased that Maureen has grasped the nettle and got the fathers at birth, because we were reliant on mother's report. And clearly, if you ask a father about his engagement and his attitude, you're going to get a very different view from asking a mother. And so, if you're looking at any research on fathers, look in the small print of the methods and see who's done the report. And then, of course, there's what men say and there's what the child experiences. And I think, you know, the bottom line is you've got to ask the child, what did he or she receive? But that is also flawed because that's biased by retrospective recall. So I think the whole area of reporting father's engagement is tricky. And then you've got the other big problem, are we quantity or quality? Just because you're there and in the house doesn't mean that you're engaged. It's the quality of the engagement that counts, particularly as we saw on the cognitive side and on the emotional side. It's the quality of the relationship, the quality of the interaction with the child that's important. And quality is a very difficult thing to measure in longitudinal studies. You can ask about the number of times you take the child to school or the number of times you change the child's nappy, but it's the quality that's difficult to get at. And then there's the complicated relationship of socioeconomic status and childcare. So there is evidence that the higher social groups are more educated and they tend to be more engaged. But unemployed men spend a lot of time with their children. They're often in the house, they're doing care, they're often doing personal care, manual care, they may be taking the kids to school, they may be doing the washing. But they may not be having the quality time that the more educated fathers. So the whole interaction with socioeconomic background is complex. And I urge you not to adopt a simplistic view here, because I think fathers from different social backgrounds interact with their children in very different ways. Then the other issue, of course, is biological fathers and father figures. Now, in Ausbach, we've found it impossible to disentangle the two. As it's gone on, you know, with mothers having 2 or 3 partners, when we start asking about fathers at the age of 18 and try to ask who was biological and who was forget it. So it's the father figure that's important. However, there is evidence from the States that even if there is a father figure in the household, a positive, engaged biological father gives an added value to that child. So biological fathers do have an advantage over father figures, stepfathers, but it's difficult to disentangle. And then there's the whole issue of male identity and fathering, this conflict between masculinity and fathering, which confounds a lot of the qualitative data and is very important to disentangle. And then, of course, the problem with longitudinal studies, you're measuring fatherhood from the past. And so the 1958 cohort, the 1970 cohort, even Ausbach was 1990, and things have changed since then. So you're dealing with a constantly changing scenario in terms of fathering and child outcomes. So, to summarize, Fathers in the 21st century are older and are more engaged with their children. I think that's true worldwide. And there's growing evidence that father's involvement has an independent effect over and above that of his relationship with the mother on the children's well-being, development, and mental health. And these effects start in pregnancy and are particularly important in the first 1,000 days. And again, particularly important in adolescence. Father's psychopathology can have an independent effect on their children's mental health, and this needs to be positively looked for. Similarly, children of absent fathers are particularly vulnerable in adolescence and often do not achieve their educational status and their life chances in employment. However, it's very important to remember that the presence of a father figure can be a very positive influence in promoting resilience in children in adversity. And we've shown this very nicely in ALSPAC with the children who've come out of adversity. A father figure has become a very important positive resilience factor through to 18. And I think the policy implication of all of this is that health and education services need to specifically engage with fathers with programs that are designed for them to promote their involvement and to encourage resilience in their children. So thank you to JA Kids for inviting me. Thank you for IDP for the funding. And thank you to ALSPAC for giving me such a wonderful experience of working with fathers.
Thank you very much, Prof. It's interesting when you become an adult and you start to read about research, and then you look back on your childhood and you see how things play out or have played out. I remember when I was in high school, there was a fellow in my school who was very disruptive. He gave a lot of trouble. He didn't do well academically at all. He was always fighting. He was a bully. And he was just a mess. Some years later, I was at home, and he turned up at my gate, looking very disheveled, asking for money, because he said his car ran out of gas. And apparently he was on drugs. Another time I was in Ligoni, and he came up to the car begging for money again. I don't think he remembered me. So we fast forward several years later now, and our daughters go to the same prep school. And I spoke to him and I said, do you remember me from high school? And he said, which one? Because I got kicked out of so many. It was a lot. And while his daughter was going to school, I heard that he used to abuse his wife. He used to physically abuse his wife. So we got to talking, and then one day in the barbershop, we're talking about her childhood, and he said to me that his father was just never there. And I could see the pain in his eyes when he spoke. He said his father was never there. He was too busy at work doing business at his lodge functions, etc. And all of those risk factors and all those things started to come back to me. Absent fathers, underachievement in school, kicked out of school, being abusive, end up on drugs, spousal abuse, all of that stuff. So it's very interesting actually seeing the data and the research behind it. Thank you very much, Prof. So our next speaker, Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, she's telling me to cut it short. So you don't want me to say too many things about you? Your foot really not big, right? You just wear big shoes. All right. Professor Sams-Vaughan will now deliver her keynote address. Prof?
First, ladies and gentlemen, and all the distinguished guests in the audience, I'd like to thank you all for being here to share with us the launch of this work over all these years. And I want to just, the young people would say, give a shout out and a big up. It's not my language, but that's how it is, to my team, because they had to put up with me for 8 years. That's amazing. Okay, that's absolutely amazing. And they are just an awesome, awesome team that accomplished so much. But today I follow on from Alan, and I'm going to be talking about what we have learned about fatherhood in Jamaica. And a lot of what Alan was speaking about, we're now going to hear about Jamaican fathers, and we're now going to see why we probably have some problems and what we might need to do to fix it. Tomorrow, we're going to be hearing some aspects of fatherhood as well. Need more? All right. So tomorrow we're going to be hearing some aspects of fatherhood as well. So let's get going. The voice of fathers is often absent in research for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because fathers are not even considered, because children are thought to be the domain of mothers. Sometimes it's because fathers are more difficult to access. Children are often brought to contact points by their mothers. So you get mothers in antenatal clinics, you get mothers at points where they're in the domain of children. We therefore often hear, as Alan just said, from fathers through the lens of mothers. One would have thought we sat and did our presentations together, Alan, but. So the J-Kid study was designed to obtain information from fathers at the birth contact and again at the 18 to 22-month contact, while also obtaining mothers' perceptions. So we had a questionnaire that Charlene told you a lot about the enrollment. So in the antenatal period, we spoke with these 5,000 moms, and we spoke with them a little bit about dads. But at birth, we spoke with the mothers, and we spoke with the fathers separately. And we talked with fathers about their experience of being fathers. And at the 9 to 12 month, and 18 to 22 month, and 48 to 54 month, we largely spoke with moms. We spoke with dads again at about a year, and at 4 to 5 years. At the birth contact, we enrolled 9,700 mothers, as Charlene said earlier. 3,400 fathers visited them within the first days post-delivery. We would have loved if we had all this wonderful money that we would have been able to go out and catch all those fathers who didn't come in at that time. We don't know why they didn't come at that time. There could have been many reasons. But we had resources that we had to use efficiently, so we spoke with all the dads that came into hospital. And we used a birth questionnaire called My Role as a Man and Father. And the choice of the questionnaire was important. The choice of the title was important because it established that we were really interested in talking with men. And we asked about their previous parenting experience. We asked how they prepared for pregnancy and delivery, separately for how they prepared for parenting. We asked them about their relationships with their partner and their expectations. We asked them about their lifestyle, their emotional well-being, and their social support. And yes, Alan, we did use the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, because that's the one that's easily available. We also asked about sexual and reproductive health. And we asked about that largely because one of our collaborators is an anthropologist who specializes in this field, but we thought it would be very, very interesting as well, so we collaborated and used his questionnaires there. And we asked about social background and fathers' own health and well-being. The emotional well-being and social support that you're going to hear tomorrow, there's going to be a paper presented on paternal depression in Jamaican fathers, so do come back and join us. The contacts at 1 to 2 years, at 9 to 12 months, Charlene told you, we interviewed 7,600 primary caregivers by telephone. Those are primarily mothers, but we asked them about how the fathers were involved. At the 18 to 22 month contact by telephone interview, we spoke with 25%, a random sample, and we had a 10% random sample that were invited, the dads were invited to come along with the moms to our sites in order to be interviewed. Again, they were interviewed. And then we had the primary caregivers' mothers report on fatherhood, and we had 389 fathers who attended and completed the questionnaire, My Role as a Man and Father of a 1-year-old. And then at 4 to 5 years, we had the 1,300 families who participated in the majority of our previous contacts at 4. We were seeing the children at 4 to 5 years, our last contact. The mothers reported the mother's reports had a number of different aspects in it, but most importantly, it had about parent-child interaction, and it had about the father's relationship with the mom. So the two groups of fathers were not terribly different. The mother's report, the birth section, is the mother's report on the fathers. And remember now, this is a 9,700 moms, so they're reporting on 9,000 fathers. And they told us that the mean age of the dads was about 31 years, and the range of ages of the dads was 14 to 80 years. We had 79 fathers between 14 and 17 years, at 1% of the population of fathers. And at birth, the mothers reported that 91% of them had a relationship with the father. So there was a 10% that was gone already at the delivery of the child. When we asked the subset of dads who came to visit, their mean age, they were a little bit younger, 30.6 years, and the range of ages was 16 to 69, and we had 66 fathers in that age group that had come to the hospital. These fathers reported a higher relationship with the mother, as one might expect, because they're the ones who are coming into hospital. But not all of them had a relationship with the mother, and they were still coming, okay? So first, as Alan said, you know, it's important to separate the reports of fathers' voices versus mothers. So first, I report on fathers' voices. Well, Jamaican fathers are pretty healthy. They describe themselves as being healthy. So most of them say they're either always or usually fit and well. And when they're ill, they don't describe themselves to be seriously ill. Sinusitis, wheezing, a bit of hypertension, a bit of diabetes, and a small proportion of sickle cell disease. They're not considering themselves to be ill at all. About 16 to 17% of them reported smoking cigarettes regularly. A quarter reported smoking marijuana. 63% reported alcohol use, and 0.1% of them reported use of cocaine and heroin. We asked dads, when did mothers tell them about the pregnancy? And most of them reported that they were told pretty smartly. I was kind of surprised at this. But a small proportion said that they were never told. They found out. And a small group of fathers reported that they had to tell the mother that she was pregnant. I actually understand this very well because my husband told me I was pregnant for the first pregnancy. So I understand this very, very well. One father reported, "I know what I did." Other fathers reported knowing shortly after conception because the baby was planned and he was sure. The father's initial response to the pregnancy. 71% of fathers said they were really happy. That's the deeper yellow mustard. 26% of fathers said they had mixed feelings. They weren't quite sure. 2% declared unhappiness, and 1% weren't sure. And that 46, Alan, you did say some of the fathers say shocked and stunned. In that 46, that was the most common. Shocked, stunned, nervous, ignorant, indifferent, felt bad. In Jamaica, you know, I struggle to understand what I feel bad means because it's a very generic term. But the shocked and the stunned and unsure is very clear. However, by the time the child was born, that 70% had moved to almost 92%. But there were still a group, 6% of fathers, who still had mixed feelings, and 0.3% that still declared that they were unhappy. More than half of fathers had had previous children, and a third had had no children. But some reported other child-rearing experience. So some had reared their partner's children, some had reared younger siblings, and some had reared other child relatives. Only about 40% of men said that they did any preparation for pregnancy, and delivery, tried to find out more. And this was completely unrelated to whether they had had any experience with pregnancy before. And the main source of information was their mother and books. But as you can see, they were using a wide range of sources: books and magazines, female relatives, male friends, health professionals. And I want you to see where their own father comes in this, because their own father comes pretty low down on the totem pole. And we don't seem to be doing so well with the male childbirth classes at all. We then asked whether they had ever tried to get any experience on parenting before the birth of the child. Half of them said they did, half of them said they didn't. And the half that did said they had done it some or a lot of the time. But a huge proportion thought they didn't need to. Those who had not sought any parenting information, 27.4% of men didn't think they needed any information at all on parenting. And then we looked at what their sources of information for parenting was. And it didn't differ that much in terms of the sequence. There was a little bit of change. Female relatives was higher than books and magazines, so they turned to the women a little bit more. But generally speaking, they followed the same kind of pattern. We also asked them to rank where they thought the best information came from. And they ranked their mothers first, and their male friends next. And then the books and the magazines and the female relatives. I suppose, Alan, you were talking about the fact that men need to be taught by men. And I suppose this is what is coming out here in terms of the ranking. We asked the dads what kind of support they had provided during pregnancy. And the ones in the brackets to the right are what mothers said dads provided. And that's for the larger group, the 9,000 group. But this is the 3,000 group, the dads we spoke to ourselves. And the majority of dads provided financial support. They were feeling the baby moving, and they felt that they were providing emotional support. They checked on the mother's well-being. They checked, up to 3/4 of them checked on the baby's well-being. And as we see, only about a half of them were attending antenatal visits. And of course, the ones who attended antenatal visits were more likely to be the ones who were also able to listen to the baby's heartbeat and watch an ultrasound. We had this generic term, other, and when we reviewed that, it was providing a lot of domestic support, helping women around the house was what was coming out. But if you look at what women said men were doing during pregnancy, it's really, really important. The women were reporting that the men were supporting them. And this is the 9,000 women. This is not the select group of men that we were seeing, the 3,400. Yes, Orville, you're really happy. So the women said that the men were providing financial support, over 80% of them, and emotional support was being provided by close to 70%, as well as checking on the mother and the baby. And the men were really not that interested in attending the antenatal visits. We asked men how they felt about different aspects of fatherhood. So we asked them about stimulating babies. And they were very strong on this. They thought talking to babies was important. They thought reading to babies helped their development. They thought hugging babies was important for their development. And they thought babies needed stimulation. But a small proportion, a third, also thought that hugging babies could spoil them. I heard somebody in there say it's true. So. We asked them about breastfeeding. And the men definitely said breast milk was better than formula. And breastfeeding created a special bond with the mom, that it allows some father involvement. But a mother who does not breastfeed is not really a good mother. But that was felt by about half of them. They also felt that breastfeeding made it more difficult for fathers to bond with their babies. And this is important to look at because men may feel completely excluded from that breastfeeding process if they're not invited into the process to become part of what is happening. A small proportion said that breastfeeding made women less attractive. 16%, that's not so small actually. Say breastfeeding made women less attractive. We talked about the role that fathers should have with their children. And fathers felt that they should spend time with their children, that they should be equally involved as the mothers, that they play an important role. But as you reported, Alan, in the high-income countries, they felt that they were better able to enjoy children when they were older. So it goes to show us that they're a little uncertain about what to do with this fatherhood bit when the children are younger. And they also felt that if it affects his job, a father is too involved. And this comes from, I think, the real importance of men providing financial support. We asked them about their gender preference. Well, before gender preference, we asked them about difficulty managing. Boy babies were felt to be less difficult than girls because only 36.6% of men felt that boy babies were more difficult than girls, but 51% felt that girl babies were more difficult to manage than boys. We asked them what gender they would have preferred, and half of them, roughly, said boys, 25% said girls, and roughly the same said either. We asked them how they would like their baby's mother to feed the baby. And although 90% of them said breast milk was best, when we asked them what was going to happen with their own baby, they felt that 44% of them felt that breast milk should be the feed that is given to the baby. But 52% of them, just over half of them, felt that both were necessary. So we have a little work to do here about breastfeeding. 2% were the progressive fathers, yes, what the mother wishes. We asked them when they thought it was okay for a mother to go to work and leave the baby and then go to work. They were clear that the majority felt that this shouldn't happen under 6 months, but most of them felt between 6 months and 2 years was okay. But there were some who felt never. The stay-at-home moms. So now we turn to mothers' reports. Remember the relationship at birth? We're looking now at the relationship the father has with mother and baby through the mother's eyes. We asked a mom who was a current partner, and we asked this at 9 months, at 18 months, and at 4 years. Remember, we started off with 91% at birth. By 9 months, the biological father, 87%, was a current partner. By 18 months, that had gone to 87%, and by 4 years, that had gone to 63%. We asked who was a father figure, and that had shifted from 91% at 9 months down to 73% at 4 years. At 4 years, only 45% of dads were living in the same home with their babies. Financial support, we see the same fall off from 9 months to 18 months to 4 years. At 4 years, we're ending up with about 60%, the same proportion that is tied to the relationship with the mother. Involvement in decision making. Fathers, 80% of fathers were involved in decision making at 9 months. 75% at 18 months were involved a lot. And at 4 years, 61%. So we're coming up with roughly the same figures all the time that are equal to the relationship with the mother. So the relationship with the baby seems to be very closely linked to the relationship with the mom. We asked about how they play with babies. At 9 months, 72% of dads were playing very often with babies per week. By 18 months, this was 62%, and by 4 years, this was 37%. So again, we see a fall off, but far more prominent here. The fall, we're starting lower first, and we're falling more rapidly in terms of dad's interaction with babies. I did tell you that we looked at sexuality among newborns, sexuality of dads of newborns in Jamaica. This is already a published paper from this study, but I'm going to tell you what the summary is. A third of men reported 2 or more sexual partners in the previous year. Remember, these are the dads who have come in for the delivery, and they're being asked about sexuality in the previous year. And the study found that men in higher quality relationships, these are men who live with or engaged with women in higher quality relationships, they reported higher frequency of sexual activity. They reported greater sexual satisfaction, and they reported fewer partners. So we have to spread the word that there are benefits to good quality relationships. So in conclusion, Jamaican fathers are generally healthy by self-report. Most are happy when told of impending fatherhood. A large proportion of those that are initially not happy become so by the birth, but 10% are still not happy then. Only a half seek parenting information, primarily from their mothers, female relatives, and male friends, and few access parenting classes. Jamaican fathers have a strong gender preference for boys. They report strong participation in pregnancy support, with the exception of activities that occur at clinics. Fathers believe in stimulation of babies and the importance of their role, but there's only partial support for breastfeeding. Mothers report fathers to be more engaged in financial support and decision-making than in interactions and play with the babies. Almost 10% of mothers report no relationship with the baby's father at the birth. And mothers report a fall-off in both the relationship with the father and all aspects of engagement with the baby between 18 months and 4 years, from 90% to 60%. I want to thank the IDB especially for allowing us to do this important work of this entire study, and more specifically this research on fatherhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sams Vaughan. And let's like to move right along to, we're going to have a panel on fatherhood. We have 3 panelists here with us this evening. We have Dr. Taylor, Dr. Orville Taylor, who's right there. He's a senior lecturer in sociology and head of the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work, right here at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Taylor? Yeah, you can get up in. Kerry Brown, my brethren, Kerry Brown, he's a public servant, and he lives in St. Andrew here. He's a father, obviously, as well. And my brethren, Wayne Marshall. You all know Wayne Marshall. He's the dancehall and reggae, right? You know, big tune like New Millennium? No, they won't know. You don't know New Millennium? You know social media, though? You know why you're doing it? Wayne, you want to give us a few lines from that one? Not really. So, Prof, I gather you're going to be moderating the panel discussion.
All right, we're kind of behind you guys, so. All right, so we have just given the science. And we've looked at the science very carefully, and we've seen some patterns, some very similar patterns from the high-income countries, low-income countries. And now we have to put the science aside a little bit, and we want to talk about the reality of fatherhood. So we want to ask you gentlemen to tell us what it felt like when you were first told that you were going to be a father.
Well, I don't know if you would say fortunately or unfortunately, that gentleman over there told me.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Abrams. I was overjoyed. And yeah, I mean over the moon, basically. And it's a feeling that unless you have it, you can't really I can't really describe it, to be honest, but it was just a great feeling, to put it that way.
So you were not one of those who were stunned and shocked?
No.
Me on the other hand, I said, Tammy, I know what I did. You're pregnant. And she said, no, and it can't be because the time. And I said, listen to me, I know what I did. But yes, I was very overjoyed. I've always seen being a father as one of the crowning glories of being a man. And from when I was a kid, I've always looked forward to being a father and, you know, seeing my kids and seeing myself in my kids and just learning from them and teaching them as well. And, you know, I was overjoyed, I was over the moon to know what I did.
You ready to answer?
Yes, this works, yeah. My journey is a little bit strange because I was a father for many, many years and I actually didn't miss biological fatherhood. Yeah. I have a son who went to school with you, Wayne, but he's not my biological son. And I discovered that he was my son. I thought he was my godson all these years, but his father died when he was about 3 or 4 years old, and he tugged onto my trousers at the funeral and looked up at me and said, "Uncle Orville, please don't let them kill you." And I discovered while he was going to UTEC, and I don't know, never forgave him for going to Wolmer's instead of George's, but never mind. Yeah. And I remember one day he was outside of my office on his cell phone having a conversation. And we have this awesome relationship. And then he was saying, "I'm outside of my father's office." And of course I started to cry. Because I realized that, not because I'm godless, but he just dropped the God off it and I was his father. And separate and apart from that, you grow up like typical 80% born out of wedlock. You grow up in an extended family and all of that. And so I did all of the nappy changings, getting pricked by the pins and children embarrassing you when you have a girlfriend visiting you and say, "Uncle, come and wipe my bottom because me do the finish." I'm like, yeah. Or my sister who lives in the house can't wake up in the night and say, "Go on, go mix the family and you hear my ball." So I did all of those kinds of things and I was fortunate. So it's kind of difficult to miss something until you have it. There's a song about I never knew I was hungry until I actually tasted. You know that song? Yeah? There's a love song. When I heard that I was having a daughter, biological daughter, and that came much later in life, I said to her mother, she's a daughter and her name is Adana. She's going to have an African name. Oh, go figure. My daughter has to have an African name. And all of the research and everything fell into place. It's my first child. But can I tell you that the old wires which were there with my niece and my nephews, because I did all the things with the niece and nephews. I remember one day when she was 4 years, when she was in grade 4, she had an awful pencil sitting on incident, and the point of the pencil broke off in her butt, and nobody could touch her. I had to leave from work. Her mother worked in the same building, by the way. I had to leave from work and come and perform the surgery and take it out. Right? So, but when I actually realized saw my daughter for the first time, and she gave me that little look, that little look that you see when you watch Gremlins and the little eyes, and I'm like, And then when she said, "Daddy," that daddy, and I'm like, she said, "Daddy," oh, okay, fine. But here's where some things came that I found very unpleasant and that's why I was pushing my arms up. Because I've been a social scientist for many, many years. There are at least 4 people in this room who I have taught, and I'm very, very proud of them. I remember a lady some years ago, I told her, "Juliet, I'm very proud of you." I remember I told you? Yes? With those conversations? Yes? I really, really am. And that's another element of the fathering too as well. But when I walked around with my daughter, and I'm a mommy's boy as well, but I walk around with my daughter, and then people say, "Oh, it's so nice to see you, the fathers, with your..." And I said, "You think that's a compliment?" So no, because your father said, "What do you know?" No, because fathers know this. You tell me. Because what amazes me about all of this, and I'm so happy for these studies, is that people are instructed by so much ignorance, including they hide the fact that they see things. You see things in front of you, and yet you believe the grand narratives about us. I've been saying it for years, since I was a young academic, that based on the fact that we were emasculated during slavery, being a father is one of the best and the greatest things that an average Jamaican man could have. And so contrary to the popular narratives, we like it. We love it. I remember another Wholeness, Dr. Wholeness, when she was at the RGD. And I'm sorry, forgive me, I know. Dr. Wholeness, when we were at the RGD, we had a forum. And she was talking, you know, about how fathers' names were absent from the birth certificate. I'm like, duh. And he had a medical doctor, and I said to him, stay in your lane. Seriously, no disrespect. And I said, you're not a scientist. You don't know to do research. When you do the research, you come back and talk to me. He said, no, we know. I said, what do you know? He said, well, you know, based on the fact that 80% of children are born out of wedlock, what does that mean? Well, it means that you have unstable families. I said, who tell you all of that? I said, you don't know any of that from the data. He said, well, it means that children are not, and of course, they took on poor Barry Evans and me there. And Barry's a nicer fellow, so he allows the kind of hit. I didn't accept it, and they thought I was unkind. So about 3 years later, she was on radio, national radio, and she said, you know, we have this new innovation, and with this great policy put in place, guess what? We now have seen an increase where 70% of fathers are now on the birth certificate, and she was patting herself on the back. And I said, yeah, I'm happy to know that you actually dug the fathers from out of the woodwork. And she's laughing. I said, are you going to apologize for the comments on air? I said, yes, go ahead. And she laughed. And she said, I did. Because the fact is, and I'm happy for that the study is finally been done. And we're going to be talking about it more tomorrow when I'm on radio. Sorry, that it is true. And it hurt me very deeply that we have spent over several centuries denigrating men who have been doing the right things over the years. And so as a father, can I tell you, I'm actually upset, by the way. I have a 9-month-old, I have a 8-month-old son, almost 8. And I really want to hurry home, because at this point he's showing paternal preference and he giggles and stuff like that. And I really didn't, and I almost was late for the broadcast this morning because I was like, and he's like, and he's now starting to do the separation anxiety and stuff and all of that. And it makes me feel worthless because I don't want to do any work. But there's nothing special about that because I'm Dr. Orville Taylor. I represent the average man from the inner cities and the lower classes and anywhere else, because fathering is one of the few things that they could not take away from us during slavery. I'm finished.
Everybody have a mic. Everybody have a mic.
So I'd like to ask the panel about engagement with babies. We've already heard about your love for your 8-month-old, but many men feel that their role comes later, and that when there's an infant, there's no specific role for a father.
No, well, I mean, to be very honest, I find myself having to find solace in the fact that, oh, I'm doing my work, or I'm doing the work for the well-being of this kid. That's why I'm missing, you know? That's why I always say, and sometimes you're right, I'm in the house, but I'm not really engaged. And then my father always comes and he hits below the belt every day. And he has these themes that he consistently runs. So he said, what I'm absentee, Dad, I'm there with my picnic, them, I play with them, you know. I hear him, no, what I'm absentee, Dad. And that's because I think he thinks that I don't spend enough quality engagement time. And being here, looking at the research and the results has really, I feel like my case and go home so I can be a better father. Because the truth is, and then there's wisdom that tells you, no, that is not engagement with the kid. You need to be, you know, face-to-face, conversation, you know, this, that. And in the back of your mind, you say, but me, I do my work, so if the bills can't pay them, I got pine finger and cuss me same way. So, you know, but then I guess it's all about striking that balance. You know, it's all about the balance of engagement and doing your job as a father and as a provider for the household, you know?
Well, for me, one of the things I'd say I was fortunate with is that I knew all my grandparents. And so I was engaged with both grandfathers. To this day, my father, who is now 83, he drives from Clarendon every weekend just to look for his grandson, right? So that has been a good example for me. I think the trickier thing for me is that my son is on the autism spectrum and he was diagnosed as being severe. So, I mean, other persons can boast, oh, you know, when I said daddy this, daddy that, I heard my son say daddy once. And it was driving him to school one morning. At the time he was going to I think, Women's Prep, because they had a special needs set up there. And I was on Tom Redcom just by Little Theatre, and I heard him say, "Daddy," and he was in the back seat, in his child seat. I couldn't even stop in the middle of the traffic and hug him. Right? And that was the only time I've ever heard him say "Daddy." Right? Because right now he's nonverbal. I know for a great part, he chooses not to speak. Because I remember one day he also has a shadow that goes with him to school. One day, Shadow was working with him and he was tired of her. He said, when she was leaving, "Goodbye." So he knows when to open his mouth. But in terms of engagement, I was fortunate, one, when he was born the 31st of December 2007. So when he was born, at the time I was at Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, and I had a lot of leave stockpile because I know he was on the way. So I could stay home. I was home until I think it was the end of February, going into March. So the housework, because at the time, Margaret, my wife, and I, we were both the helper, the cook, before he was born. So now everything sort of fell to me until we got somebody. So as it relates to, and he had weird sleeping hours. 1 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the morning, he's up. So there were times when, I remember one night I had to go into my room, put on my sneakers, because, you know, those are the harnesses that you have on the front. And I had to be walking with him, and every time I stopped, he would tap my chest that night. And I walked until I blew in the face. So, I mean, that, for me, I mean, my type of engagement might be somewhat different than, say, for a quote-unquote normal child. Although I believe all of us are on the spectrum at some point or the other. So, and then as he gets older, because he's 10, you have to think about, like with any child, when the hormones kick in, how you're going to deal with that. How you're going to communicate that to him, how you're going to let him understand these feelings. And you know, even simple things like, say he were here with me this evening. If it's a strange building, it might take a time for him to come in, or he might not come in at all. And so you have to be engaging with at different levels, different times, and you know. So for me, it's non-stop. And I hear what you're saying in terms of, they say sometimes you're at home and so sometimes you pick up the phone. Well, fortunately, I'm not on social media. So I don't have that to content. But sometimes you're on your phone, whether it be really to work on it. And I say, no, it's his time. You drop the phone and you put it down and you walk away and leave it. So it's a balance. It's a serious balance.
Sorry, you want to say something?
No, you go ahead. You talked a lot in the beginning.
That you've been here, you've listened to the research, and you have your own lived experience, yes? What would you say would have been good for you to help you with fathering? How would you have liked to have gotten information? Would you have liked to have gotten information, and what do you think would have been most appealing to you?
Well, no, for me, I had, as I said, I had role models in my grandparents. They were, I mean, and my grandfathers were very confident men. So even though my maternal grandfather, he was a humble little farmer in the district that he was, very confident man. My paternal grandfather, he had a piano store on Beeston Street. But whenever we are at either of their houses, they always engage with us. I remember him, my paternal grandfather reading to us all the while and that sort of thing. The part of the study that really resonates with me is the engagement with fathers, or father figures. Some grandparents, my father to this day, as Mrs. Holden said, whether you want the advice or not, they're going to give you. And so for me, that I think resonates for me with the study. That involvement in my life has been number one for me.
Personally, I think that it all boils down to the type of person, the type of father that it is. the information, how receptive, because whether or not you give somebody information, feed it to them, give them a pamphlet on the internet, if they are not resonating with the information, if they think they know it all, or I don't need to read this for being a father, or to sit down and listen to nobody do no research, that not apply to me, you know? So in my observation, I observe two basic types of dads. One father who is very excited, sees it as his duty as a human. You know, I guess there's some spiritual aspect to it as well. And then there's the other type of father who is kind of thinking, I want to be a father because I can't take the teasing no more. And you know what I mean? They might call me man Guinep and gelding, and I just want to make a youth. And that type of a father now, no matter how much information you have about fatherhood, it not going to help him, because him just want to jump out of the I don't have a kid, or you know, contribute to mankind, you know? Like, I see this daily in the ghettos and even uptown, you know, and even in my musical sphere, I can see the two different types of fathers. Because you have a father like a Sean Paul who is wealthy, could have had 10 picnics in 10 different continents, but he always thought of himself as being a father that wanted to be a great father. You know, so he has this kid, one child, big man. You have Agent Sasko, who has 3 kids, you know, have them all under one roof. But then you have other artists who I won't mention, because I see camera and beer things. So after the air we can go talk outside, we call name. But yeah, then you have those other artists who have all 10, 12, 15, 20, some can't even keep count. You know, and that father, no matter what kind of information, no matter how well compiled it is or how proven it is, he's uninterested. You know what I mean? He's not fazed by it. But then, me sitting down there, this conference, I think, has done enough for me to change a lot of my attitudes towards fatherhood and parenting. I never even know there was postnatal associated with man. I thought that mean woman. Natal, paternal, but just things a woman deal with that. And me go good school, old mass. So I think it all comes down to the individual, you know, and how receptive they are and how much they view fatherhood as as a right, you know.
I'm probably cheating here because, as I said, I had a very good dry run as an uncle. You know, when I used to come home in the evenings, and I didn't know how I managed to do it. I had 2 nephews and a niece, and I have only a pair of feet, and them have to take up my shoes and my socks and all that sort of thing. But actually, for me, this conference and the research is more a vindication and validation. I've been reading sociology and psychology from before I came to university. And so in many ways, this is a beat your chest and like, see, I told you so moment. Shove it down your face, things, stop talking, telling lies now, and even some of the things that people say about children having children, and they think that it's in the Bible, that it's not in the Bible because they didn't bother to read it. I'd like to talk to Gino, right? But I think the one thing that I really like in terms of widening my knowledge is, again, the point about post and prenatal. I think the postnatal depression in men, but the antenatal depression is something that I had a little bit of a question about, certainly in terms of your methodology, Prof. And maybe I should just ask, you know, since I have the mic, because because you talked about the association between antenatal depression and baby crying. I imagine that you're saying that the antenatal depression is an independent variable and it actually causes the crying, as opposed to it's a baby crying that causes it before. Because I can't, yeah, okay. I was wondering about something about the temporal order, yeah. And so, like, for me, bearing in mind some of the arguments and the points I've been making about paternity leave and those things that men really want to engage, men really want to. And in those countries that have paternity leave, contrary to the popular belief, they have higher levels of productivity because you have higher levels of employee engagement, and where you have those things, you end up with with all of the kind of economic outcomes. So in fact, it pays economic dividends to use the kind of research for those purposes. So I'm just excited, and I'm hoping that I could use some of this research in my master's courses in HRD, because I have a large body of women who do HR, who are kind of schizophrenic, because on the one hand, they engage the grand narrative about the worthless men because they personalize the one or two negative experiences. But yet when I say to them, you are HR managers, because you're all managers are HR managers. And when a man comes to you and he says, I want not even paternity leave, we're not even there yet. I want time off in order to do something that is going to make me more involved in the lives of my children. And I'm telling you, right now we're doing some research on worker attitude, right now as we speak. And can I tell you that there's a great resistance among women. And they're the very same women who are saying, the father them worthless. We say, yeah, but you're not allowing them to go. So I'm hoping that we will use this to instruct policy. And I think I need to say anything else for the rest of the night.
All right. If you have any, we're just going to ask if there are any final comments. Other than that, we've heard a lot of what you have to say. And any final comments from the panel?
Personally, I think that there's the spiritual aspect of being a father should be a part of the conversation, because the truth is, I believe that becoming a father is one of the most direct missions that God can put you on. So I do believe. No, man, it's not just saying it. I really do think that, and by my observation, that children are here for their parents, to be taught by them, but to also teach them in a lot of ways. So sometimes you might have a kid who has a problem, or, and you think, why me, how come? But then it's because God knows that you can deal with it. And just based on hearing you say what you say about your son, and just how you deal with him and how you've come to grow to treat him. It's just like I have 3 sons, and they're all pretty healthy. My brother's child, and Miss Vaughn knows, Miss Sans Vaughn knows, she has a speech problem, and my brother can deal with it. He can deal with it. And his wife can deal with it, and I just know that when we get children, it is because God wants us to be with this child, teach this child, and not just us, but the structure around, the community around. It's all about. It's always perfect. It's always perfect for the situation, no matter how we, in our limited understanding of the situation, might see it as not being so perfect. So I think that we need to accept the spiritual nature of us having this human being and these human beings. And I mean, I learn from my children a lot, even directly and indirectly. My son is so talented in music that I have had to reevaluate my talent, because I said to myself, then if me make him and him so bad, that means say you must bad too. So it's like, it gives me, just being there, it kind of gives me, it kind of re-energizes me and gives me confidence. So here it is, me now, I run all about and now look at my picnic. I would never even get that boost that I need now at this stage of my life and career, just based on just seeing him and observing him and seeing, God sent him for me. And I know that. So I have to take on the responsibility like it's a divine responsibility.
For me, I remember when Professor Samson diagnosed Kamar to be on the spectrum. And there's one thing that resonated with me when she said, 80% of parents with children who are on the autism spectrum end up in divorce. And I remember sitting there in the office that day and saying to myself, I'm not going to be a statistic. And I said that quietly to myself, and my wife did the same thing. And I didn't even realize that she did it. But we work hand in hand. There are times when she's also, she works with the government. So there are times when sometimes she has to be at work late. I go home, relieve who is there with him, and then sometimes I have to go back after his father sleep 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, just to get some things done. So, you know, but the other thing for me, I would say, is that, especially speaking as a parent of a special needs child, he has made it so much for me that in terms of the importance that he has in my life, that a lot of things pale in comparison no matter what is happening around you. Right? He has taught me patience, and he has taught me a lot. I mean, just the small steps that he makes is, you know, serious victories for me. I mean, nowadays, before he would want something, he would maybe take you to it or to show you to it. No, he has this special little touch that he gives you, that when he wants something, he points at it and he touches you a little soft little way. And so you see evolution in his communication and so on. So that just warms your heart, and you know that, okay, fine. As you said, when we're put here for a special reason. And it's just it's just a joy being a parent. So I know some people say, oh, why me and blah. No, for me, it's just a joy having him. And as you said, when I go home, it's time for me and him again, because he's not a morning person, but he stays up late. So that's me again.
It's just that this last touch of fatherhood with that 7-month to 8-month-old child has turned me into a little bit of a punk, and I'm doing all these things. And so it shows a little bit of paternal preference, and of course, and I'm kind of rubbing it, you know, like a child. I'm sort of a kid. So I'm like, okay, en los lunes vamos a hablar puramente español, and on Tuesday we talk English, and on Wednesday par français. And my wife is like, watch me, are you? It's really exciting because I'm doing it all over again. But can I tell you, when you pull everything together, and this picture of the Child Care and Protection Act is running around my head, because while I understand and I'm happy that I've got the role again to be a father once more, I do recognize that my fathering role really doesn't stop at my gateway. It doesn't stop, right? And there are youth in my community at different ages who would need different kinds of fathering at different points in time. And I have to continue to engage, because I don't have the moral authority later on down the road to make negative statements. If I walk past my neighbors, I behave as if I don't care, simply because what's happening in my house is okay. So bearing in mind everything that we have looked at and the validation coming from the study, I would just want to say, yes, let us try to be very good fathers ourselves to our own biological children. But there are youth out there, young men and women, including those at the university here, who still need some fathering. And if God has blessed us with that kind of ability, let's share it. I'm finished. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank all you gentlemen for spending the evening with us and volunteering, in quotation marks, to be on our panel. Thank you so much. You have given us some insight. You've shown us out of the research how important it is for us to get this word out there. And Orville will be getting it out there tomorrow on radio. All right. Yes, he'll be doing an outside broadcast here tomorrow. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. We're kind of winding down and wrapping up now. I just want to make a comment about this paternity leave thing. Today I saw a patient of mine who came for a postnatal visit, and she and her husband, they're having their 5th child, and they're very good parents, and he had applied for paternity leave. She asked me to facilitate that, and I actually wrote a letter to his employer for paternity leave. and he got a fight. He had to resign. He offered his resignation, sent a letter in, and that's when they finally granted him paternity leave without pay. And his supervisor was a woman. So we have a lot of work to do to change the culture. And one final thing I want to ask fathers out there, if you have young boys, please, I beg you, try to raise our sons to be respectful to women. I really don't like what I'm seeing out there. For example, popular music has a lot of influence on young people from ever since. If you go back to the days of the Beatles, parents freaked out over the Beatles, and that's nothing. Just to tell you, in case you don't know, the most popular genre of music in America today is hip-hop, is rap, for the first time. And not all rap is bad. But if you listen to the charts, a lot of the most popular songs in rap, if you do listen, women are commonly called bitches and hoes. It's like par for the course. You have a rap song, you have to bring in bitches and hoes. A lot of local songs, girls are called gal. And our kids listen to these things. So I think you should listen to the charts and listen. You may not like it, but you need to know what the kids are listening to. And it's important to guide our kids, because I was worried about the dancehall artists, or some of them, and some of the rap artists. And there's a pastor now calling women whores and prostitutes. And we need to guide our sons to be respectful. And these conversations must be had from early. I remember when my son was in grade 4 or 5, he was doing bio. And whatever they call it in prep school, science, including human, he was in the reproductive stuff, okay, whatever that. So something came up one day, a conversation, and the word vagina came up, and he's like, vagina, And I said to him, don't you ever, ever make up your face when you say the word vagina. It's not something nasty. It's a beautiful thing. It represents life. Don't ever let me see you make up your face when you say that word. Another time he was approaching GSAT, and they're doing the reproductive system and the menstrual cycle, and I showed him a pad and a tampon, and I said, this is what girls use. This is what they use. And you're at the age now where some girls going to start seeing this. It can come down on them unpredictably. So if you're at school and you see a girl with any stuff like on the clothes, you discreetly tell her and you escort her to the bathroom, be a gentleman about it. You have to have these discussions with your kids from now, because a lot of our men have totally, absolutely no respect for women. So finally, almost finally, we have some information that we need to get about the conference events. Is Jody Ann here? Jody? Is Jody here? Jody Ann? Jody Ann Reese?
Thank you very much, Dr. Abrams. I think we've had a great start to the conference, and we have an exciting 2 days ahead. So I won't be long, because we're all hungry. So number one, to our left, to my left, there's the exhibition, the JA Kids exhibition, which will show, will give us some details on the methodology of the study. We really would have to have another conference on the JA Kids method, all the details, but we've tried to put together a little expo so you can go through and see the various things that we had to do. You can also view the JA Kids documentary. There's a little station for that. There's a spatial display from MGI, which is really cool. And there's also an assessment station. So you can go and do the assessments that we've done with the children, so you can see what they went through 18 months and 4 years. It will be really interesting. So that station will be manned for the entire 2 days. So we also have keynote addresses. So we have Marta, who's sitting in the front, from Oxford University, who will give the keynote tomorrow morning on doing cohort studies internationally and what are the lessons learned. We also have right in front Mrs. Charlene Deslandes from the ECC, who will give the keynote on Friday about the value of ECD to national development outcomes. We'll also have tomorrow an overview of the 2 birth cohort studies, the 1986 study and the 2011 study, for those who are interested in the more detailed methodology. So we also have a series of panels based on the data. So everything that you're going to hear over the course of the 2 days in the panels is from the JA Kids database. And this is all very preliminary, and we're going to describe a variety of things about the life of Jamaican children. So we'll have panel 1, which is on the health and well-being of children and their parents. And in that section, we're going to speak about maternal and paternal depression. Panel 2 is parenting in Jamaica. That's pretty topical. We have a session on parental investment and outcomes at 18 months, which is maternal investment, which we have measured not just socioeconomically, but in terms of time spent. and other aspects. We're going to have 2 breakout sessions tomorrow as well, which are focused on practitioners that are going to be coming from health and education, and it's basically about putting research into practice. So that will be very interesting for those who are interested as well. And on Friday is our big day for child development. We'll have 2 panels on child development, and it will cover a variety of topics, including developmental milestones, the emergence of developmental disabilities, exposure to violence, nutrition, exposure to heavy metals at birth using the cord blood data. And we'll also have a panel discussion about the policy implications on the data that has been presented over the past 2 days. So we'd all like everyone to attend, but if you're unable to attend, there are certain things that you should note. There'll be a live stream on the UWI's YouTube page. Unfortunately, you can just Google YouTube UWI live stream and it will come up. It's happening now. The social media hashtags are, I can't really see them. First 5, hashtag JKids, first 5 years. And so hopefully we'll be flooding social media as much as possible. And as you heard from Dr. Taylor and Prof, we'll be having an outside broadcast, so if you can't come, you can watch online, and please listen to Hotline. We'll all be on talking about the study, 94 FM. All right, so that's basically it for the conference events, and ready. So I hope you'll come and you'll enjoy.
Thank you very much, Jody, and I'd now like to invite Dr. Roxanne Melbourne Chambers, Head of the Department of Child and Adolescent Health, University of the West Indies, staff, for the vote of thanks.
Good night, everyone. I'd just love to take this opportunity as head of department that hosts this wonderful study to offer our congratulations. We're extremely proud, and tonight's showing of the work of the cohort study and these 2 presentations and the panel discussion, all of this has just been spectacular. We're very proud. So it's my task to move the vote of thanks. And we'd like first to thank all the people who contributed to this event and to the conference proceedings, starting with our patron, the Most Honorable Mrs. Andrew Holness, Senator the Honorable Mr. Roel Reed, representatives from the IDB, UWI, Early Childhood Commission, and Ministry of Health for bringing greetings on behalf of these institutions, and our guest speaker. Welcome back, Professor Alan Emond. Our fathers who shared their experiences with us, thanks Mr. Brown, Mr. Marshall, and Dr. Taylor, and Dr. Michael Abrahams for chairing this event like only he could. Our J-Kids and Junior J-Kid for their contribution to tonight's program. And yes, we have to big them up because I looked and said, my gosh, I stood there for so long waiting, extremely composed, and any one of us would have been shaking and nervous. They're really wonderful. And the Pan Rhythms Band for providing entertainment. The Faculty of Medical Sciences Teaching and Research Complex, especially Mr. Craig Hall, Mrs. Janet Russell, and Mr. Dwayne Redwood. Social Welfare Catering, UWI Maintenance Department, DEMAR for providing decor, and all of you, our distinguished guests, for your support and participation tonight. But there are also many persons who have supported the project over the last 8 years and who made all of this possible. So please bear with us as we thank them as well. There are funders and partners. The Inter-American Development Bank has been the main funder of the study, and we thank them for their support over the last 8 years. We'd like especially to thank Cynthia Hobbs, Anel Belani, Janet Quarry, and Yanu Cruz from the IDB team. The consortium, Prof mentioned the consortium, Michigan State University, University of Texas, Health Science Center at Houston and Wayne State University. So I don't know. I know Prof. Lambert is here, Prof. Rabar, and probably we could just say a big thanks to them as they're here in person. So especially for their support in funding the collection of biological samples in the study and for the provision of a -80°C freezer for storing these samples. We'd also like to thank the following national and international organizations who have made significant contributions to various aspects of the study. So these are the National Health Fund, UNICEF, World Bank, Chase Fund, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Parenting Partners of the Caribbean, and Grace Kennedy Foods. Mona Geoinformatics, Jamaica Kids would like to thank Dr. Paris Layu Ayi, Mrs. Lisa Gay Green, and the rest of the team at Mona Geoinformatics for collaborating with the Jamaica Kids in the geocoding of residential addresses of mothers enrolled in the birth cohort study. The Ministry of Health for their assistance in the collection of data in the antenatal and birth phases of the project, and the Early Childhood Commission. We also want to thank the development officers of the ECC for their assistance with data collection in phase 2A of the study. Our own UWI, so there are many persons at the UWI who facilitated the study, including the Special Projects Unit, especially Ms. Jacqueline McLean, Ms. Charmaine Bent, Ms. Debian Powell, and Ms. LaFane Taylor. The team wants to thank especially Charmaine for putting up with all their demands. And I sang a few things as to them coming through and so on. Some myths, especially Damon Brown, Marlon Grant, Andrew Litchmore, Chris Muir, and Marlon Christie. And from Carrigan, Mr. Compton Beecher for assistance with the storage and shipping of biological samples. The project now want to thank the steering committee for their support and guidance during the study administration, Carlin Lazarus and Signcraft Limited for the design of the J-Kids logo, and for design and printing of the J-Kids baby book, coloring book, and various flyers used throughout the study, often free of charge. Also want to show appreciation to all the nurses, doctors, lab technicians, community health aides, teachers, and principals who assisted in data collection at various points in the study. And words can't express our gratitude to the J-Kids staff over the years, the interviewers, data entry clerks, administrative and auxiliary staff, research assistants, field research officers, and supervisors. Your contribution was immeasurable. And finally, we'd like to thank all of the partners of the study, all the J-Kids children and their families for agreeing to be a part of the study and for sharing their lives with us. Thank you.
Before we all leave, we have a few presentations to be made. Prof? The first will be to Mrs. Holness. See, I couldn't find any green paper. I just asking. No, it's Jamaica. Jamaica has a green and the flies. Where you going, sir? Sure. I'm just asking. I'm just saying. Minister Reid, we have something for you as well. Dr. Martha Favara. And for Professor Emond. I think that kind of wraps up everything. So, I get something too? Oh, yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I hope you'll be attending the rest of the conference. We have an exhibition outside, right?
Yeah. It'll be up for the next 2 days as well. As Jody said, it'll be up for the next 2 days. Just thank the ushers.
I'd like to thank the ushers as well. Didn't mean to leave you guys out. Thank the ushers as well. And thank you all for coming. God bless you all. Right.